The deep void of space rippled with the arrival of death itself. 847 crystalline ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like polished jewels against the darkness. Each vessel stretched, nearly a kilometer in length, bristling with weapon ports that pulsed with contained energy. The Zenthari hegemony had arrived, and with them came the promise of conquest. Commander Vextal stood on the bridge of his flagship, his forearms folded behind his back as he gazed at the tactical display. The holographic representation showed their target system in all its primitive glory. 3 small planets orbited a yellow star, with only the third showing signs of life. Intelligence reports indicated a young species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They called themselves humans, and they would soon learn the price of existing in Zenthari space. "Fleet status report," Vextal commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never tasted defeat. "All vessels report ready for combat operations, Commander," replied his tactical officer. "Energy reserves at maximum, quantum weapons charged, and shield matrices fully operational." Vextal allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be conquest number 24 for the hegemony. The humans would either submit immediately or join the countless species that had tried to resist Zenthari might. The outcome was never in doubt. 3 billion kilometers away, Captain Jake Morrison was having the worst day of his career. The routine supply run to the mining colonies of Kepler 442b had been proceeding normally until his sensor officer had started swearing in languages Jake didn't recognize. "Captain, you need to see this." Lieutenant Amy Foster called from her station, her voice tight with concern. Jake moved to the sensor console of the colony ship New Horizon and felt his blood turn cold. The long-range sensors were picking up energy signatures unlike anything in human databases. The readings showed massive objects moving in perfect formation, each one generating power levels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Computer estimates 800-plus vessels, sir. Each one appears to be roughly a kilometer in length." Amy's fingers danced across her controls as she tried to refine the readings. "Captain, the energy output from just one of those ships is greater than our entire colonial fleet combined." Jake stared at the display for a long moment, his mind racing through the implications. Humanity had always known this day would come. Ever since achieving faster-than-light travel, the question had never been if they would encounter hostile aliens, but when. "Send an immediate burst transmission to Earth," Jake ordered. "Priority Alpha classification. Include all sensor data and our current position. Sure, Fleet Command knows what's heading their way." The transmission raced across space at faster-than-light speeds, carrying news that would change everything. On Earth, the message arrived at Fleet Command headquarters during the morning briefing. Admiral Lisa Kane was reviewing colonial expansion reports when her aide rushed into the room with a datapad. "Admiral, we have a priority Alpha transmission." "From the outer colonies," the aide said, his face pale. Lisa took the pad and felt her heart skip a beat as she read the report. The moment every human military planner had prepared for had finally arrived. She activated the emergency communication system that connected her directly to every major military installation in human space. "This is Admiral Kane to all stations. Protocol 7 is now active. Repeat, Protocol 7 is active. Across human space," the message triggered a carefully planned response. On Mars, Colonel Ryan Brooks received the alert at Orbital Defense. Station Gibraltar, and immediately began activating systems that had been hidden for decades. In the asteroid belt, mining stations that were actually disguised weapons platforms came online for the first time. And in the deepest reaches of the solar system, 12 ships began powering up systems that no alien species had ever encountered. The human response was not what any galactic civilization would expect. Where other species built massive fleets to intimidate their enemies, humanity had chosen a different path. Quality over quantity, stealth over spectacle, intelligence over brute force. Captain Amy Rodriguez aboard the science vessel Discovery had been monitoring deep space communications for years, piecing together fragments of alien transmissions. Her work had revealed the Zenthari method of conquest, Overwhelming displays of force followed by immediate surrender demands. Every species that had faced them had either submitted immediately or been destroyed within hours. But humans were different. They had spent 50 years preparing for this exact scenario. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical doctrine had been designed with one goal in mind: defeating a technologically superior enemy through superior thinking. Back in the Kepler system, Commander Vextel was growing impatient. His fleet had been in position for several hours, and the primitive humans had not responded to their presence. Most species detected Zenthari fleets immediately and began broadcasting surrender terms within minutes. The silence from the human colonies was unusual. Communications send the standard ultimatum to all inhabited worlds in this system, Vextel ordered. The transmission that followed had been used successfully 23 times before. It was simple, direct, and effective. Submit to Zenthari rule immediately or face complete destruction. Your technology is inferior. Your weapons are useless. Resistance will result in the elimination of your entire species. The message reached every human. Installation in the system simultaneously. On the mining colonies, workers stopped their operations and stared at communication screens in shock. On cargo ships, crews gathered around displays showing the alien fleet in all its terrible glory. And on defense stations, military personnel began final preparations for a battle they had trained for their entire careers. But instead of panic, there was something else. Determination. Humans had always been stubborn, and 50 years of preparation had given them confidence in their abilities. The aliens might have superior technology, but humans had something else: the element of surprise. The first phase of humanity's response was already beginning, though the Zenthari had no idea what was coming. Deep in space, weapon systems that operated on principles unknown to galactic civilization were powering up. The aliens were about to learn that humans had spent decades studying their enemies and developing the countermeasures. The war for humanities. Survival was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Zenthari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. 847 ships materialized in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls reflecting the distant light of Earth's sun. The sight would have terrified any species that had faced them before. But the humans were not like any species the Zenthari had encountered. Commander Vextel stood on his bridge, watching the primitive star system spread before him. On the tactical display, 3 planets orbited the yellow star, with the third showing clear signs of civilization. Orbital stations dotted the space around the world, and several small ships moved between the planets. It was exactly what he expected from a young, technologically inferior species. "Begin standard first contact protocol," Vextel commanded. His voice carried across the bridge with the confidence of someone who had conquered 23 worlds. "Broadcast the ultimatum on all frequencies. These humans will surrender within the hour, just like all the others." The message that went out from the Zenthari flagship was the same one that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. The words were translated into the primitive human language and sent across every communication channel in the system. "Submit immediately to Zenthari rule. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses are worthless. Surrender now, or your species will be eliminated." On Earth, the message reached every military installation simultaneously at Fleet Command Headquarters. Admiral Lisa Kane stood in the operations center, surrounded by displays showing the alien fleet in all its terrible glory. The numbers were overwhelming. 800 ships against humanity's 12. Any conventional military analysis would call it hopeless, but Admiral Kane was not thinking conventionally. She had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, studying every piece of intelligence about galactic warfare that humans had managed to gather. The Zenthari followed predictable patterns: overwhelming force, energy weapons, plasma shields, intimidation tactics. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by their rules. "Send our response," Kane ordered. Her communication officer looked up from his console with surprise. "Admiral, are you sure?" The standard response would be to request negotiations, or send it exactly as written, Kane interrupted. The message she had prepared was simple and direct. You have entered human space without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Colonel Ryan Brooks received the alien ultimatum. At Orbital Defense Station Gibraltar, positioned high above Earth's North Pole. The massive structure had been disguised as a civilian research facility for decades, but now its true purpose was revealed. Hidden weapon systems came online as Brooks activated defense protocols that had been tested countless times in simulation, but never in real combat. All defensive platforms report ready, his tactical officer announced. The network is fully operational, Brooks nodded grimly. The defensive network was humanity's first line of protection, but it was also their greatest. Secret. For 20 years, humans had been quietly building weapons platforms throughout the solar system. Not the massive obvious fortifications that other species constructed, but small hidden installations that could coordinate their fire with devastating precision. Captain Amy Rodriguez, aboard the science vessel Discovery, was positioned at the edge of the solar system, carefully monitoring the alien fleet with every sensor at her disposal. Her ship looked like a simple research vessel, which it had been until Protocol 7 activated hidden systems throughout its hull. Captain, I'm getting detailed scans of their fleet composition, her sensor officer reported. The energy signatures match our intelligence reports. They're using standard galactic technology. Plasma weapons, energy shields, and conventional fusion drives. Amy smiled grimly. Humanity had studied the patterns of galactic warfare for decades. Intercepting communications and analyzing the wreckage of battles between other species. Every major civilization used the same basic approach, energy-based weapons and defensive systems. It was effective, proven, and completely predictable. Continue monitoring, Amy ordered. Document everything. Command needs to know exactly what we're facing. The Zenthari response to humanity's defiant message was immediate. Commander Vextel's forearms tensed with anger as he read the human transmission. No species had ever dared to issue demands to the hegemony. The audacity was beyond comprehension. Tactical analysis, Vextel snapped. Show me their defensive capabilities. The holographic display updated to show human installations throughout the system. Orbital stations around the third planet. A few ships moving between worlds. Mining operations in the asteroid belt. It was exactly what any primitive species would build as they expanded into their home system. Commander, their technology appears to be at least 200 years behind our own, the tactical officer reported. Energy output from their installations is minimal. We detect no significant weapon signatures. It should be a simple conquest. But something bothered Vextel. Human response had been too confident to direct. Species that knew they were outmatched usually tried to negotiate or buy time. They begged for mercy or attempted to flee. They did not issue ultimatums to vastly superior forces. Communications. Has there been any response from other human installations? Negative, Commander. All human facilities remain at normal operational levels. No evacuation attempts detected. No distress signals. They appear to be conducting normal activities. This was wrong. Every instinct Vextel had developed through decades of conquest told him that the humans should be panicking. Their fleets should be scrambling to defensive positions. Their civilians should be fleeing. Instead, they seemed to be ignoring the presence of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Captain Ben Taylor received his orders aboard the USS Defiance while the ship was disguised as a cargo hauler in the asteroid belt. The Defiance had been built to look like a simple freight vessel, but its true nature was something else entirely. Hidden beneath its civilian exterior was technology that no alien species had ever encountered. All hands, this is the captain, Taylor announced over the ship's communication system. Protocol 7 is now active. We're no longer a cargo vessel. We're a warship of the Earth Defense Fleet, and we have work to do. Throughout the ship, panels slid away to reveal weapon systems that operated on principles unknown to galactic civilization. The Defiance was humanity's first stealth warship. It's designed to appear harmless while carrying enough firepower to destroy ships 10 times its size. Lieutenant, Colonel Sarah Martinez coordinated the activation of humanity's hidden defenses from a command center buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. For 2 decades, she had overseen the construction of the most elaborate defensive network ever created. Now it was time to see if their preparations would be enough. "Network status report," she called out. "All platforms online and ready. 347 defensive installations reporting full operational status. Targeting computers are locked onto priority targets." Sarah nodded. The humans had not built massive battleships like other species. Instead, they had created a web of small, hidden weapons platforms that could coordinate their attacks with computer precision. Each platform was individually weak, but together they could deliver devastating concentrated fire. The stage was set for humanity's first real test against galactic civilization. The Zenthari expected a quick surrender followed by easy conquest. The humans were preparing to show them something that had never been seen in the galaxy before. The next few hours would determine whether humanity survived or joined the list of species that had underestimated Zenthari power. But the aliens were about to learn that humans had been underestimated before, and it never ended well for those who made that mistake. Admiral Lisa Kane stood in the command center deep beneath fleet headquarters, watching as displays showed the positions of every human ship and defense platform in the solar system. Protocol 7 had been active for 6 hours now, and the transformation was complete. What had appeared to be a peaceful civilian system was now revealed as the most carefully prepared battlefield in human history. "All units report ready for combat operations," her communications officer announced. "The network is fully online." Kane nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the Zenthari fleet maintaining position at the edge of the system. "We're waiting, probably expecting humanity to collapse into panic and surrender." The aliens had no idea what they were actually facing. "Activate Phase 1, Kane ordered. "Begin deployment." Across the solar system, ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers and research vessels began dropping their false identities. Hidden weapon systems emerged from civilian hulls. Fake registration codes were replaced with military designations. The 12 ships of Earth's defense fleet revealed themselves for what they truly were: Commander. Ben Taylor felt the USS Defiance transform around him as the ship's true systems came online. The cargo bay doors opened to reveal missile launch tubes. Sensor arrays extended from hidden compartments. The fusion reactor that had been running at minimal power surged to full capacity, providing energy for weapons that no alien species had ever seen. "Weapons status report," Taylor called out. "All railgun systems operational. Kinetic missile pods loaded and ready. Point defense systems online. We are ready for combat, sir." Taylor smiled grimly. The Defiance looked like a simple freight hauler from the outside, but it carried enough firepower to level a city. More importantly, it carried weapons that the Zenthari had never encountered and would not know how to defend against. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez watched from her underground command center as the defensive network activated across the solar system. 347 hidden platforms came online simultaneously, their targeting computers linking together to create a web of coordinated firepower that covered every approach to Earth. "Platform status report," her tactical officer announced. "All installations report full operational readiness. Target acquisition systems are locked onto the alien fleet." Sarah had spent 20 years overseeing the construction of this network. Each platform was small enough to avoid detection, but powerful enough to punch holes through the heaviest armor. They were positioned throughout the asteroid belt, hidden among mining operations, and disguised as communication relays. The aliens had no idea they existed. "Begin tracking protocols," Sarah ordered. "I want firing solutions on every ship in that fleet." Captain Amy Rodriguez aboard the Discovery continued her sensor analysis of the Zenthari formation, documenting every detail that might give humanity an advantage. Her ship maintained its position at the edge of the system, appearing to be nothing more than a scientific observation vessel. "Captain, I'm detecting movement in their fleet," her sensor officer reported. 3 ships have broken formation and are heading toward the inner system. Amy studied the tactical display. The approaching vessels were smaller than the main battleships, but still dwarfed anything in the human fleet. They were moving slowly, confidently, probably conducting a standard reconnaissance sweep. "Continue monitoring," Amy ordered. "Document their approach patterns and weapon signatures. Command needs to know exactly how they operate." Commander Vextel was growing increasingly frustrated with the human response. 6 hours had passed since the ultimatum, and the primitive species continued to ignore Zenthari demands. Their ships moved about the system conducting normal operations. Their installations showed no signs of evacuation or defensive preparations. It was as if they did not understand the danger they faced. "Send a squadron forward to investigate their defenses," Vextel ordered. 3 ships should be sufficient to demonstrate our superiority. The Zenthari destroyers that moved toward the inner system were each nearly 800 meters long and bristling with plasma weapons. Their energy shields could deflect any known weapon, and their firepower could reduce a planet's surface to molten rock. Against a primitive species like humanity, they should have been invincible. Captain Nick Hayes received his orders aboard the USS Retribution as the alien scouts approached. His ship had been disguised as a mining vessel, complete with fake cargo holds and civilian transponder codes. Now it was time to reveal what humanity had actually built. "All hands, battle stations," Hayes announced. "This is not a drill. Are about to engage hostile alien forces." The Retribution had been designed according to human military philosophy. Where other species built ships to intimidate their enemies, humans built ships to kill them efficiently. The vessel was smaller than the approaching Zenthari. Destroyers but carried weapons that operated on completely different principles. Weapons. "Systems report," Hayes called out. "Railguns charged and ready. Kinetic penetrator rounds loaded. Targeting computers have solutions on all 3 approaching vessels." Hayes studied the tactical display showing the alien ships approaching in standard formation. They were not taking evasive action or raising shields to maximum power. They expected easy victory against primitive human technology. "Lock targets on the lead vessel," Hayes ordered. "Prepare to fire on my command." The 3 Zenthari destroyers continued their approach, their commanders confident in their technological superiority. They had plasma cannons capable of melting through any known armor. They had energy shields that could deflect the most powerful weapons. They had conquered 23 species using the same tactics and technology, but they had never faced humans. Before, the USS Retribution appeared on their sensors as a simple cargo vessel, barely worth their attention. The human ship was less than half their size and showed minimal energy signatures. It posed no threat to ships of the hegemony. This confidence would prove to be their fatal mistake. Captain Maria Opazé, aboard the heavy cruiser USS Vengeance, received targeting data from the sensor network and prepared her ship's primary weapons. The Vengeance carried the most advanced kinetic weapons in the human fleet, designed specifically to counter energy-based defenses. "Captain, we have target lock on all 3 alien vessels," her weapons officer reported. "Railguns are charged and ready." Maria nodded. The moment she had trained for her entire career was finally here, humanity's first battle against Galactic. Civilization would determine whether Earth survived or became another conquered world in the Zenthari Empire. "All ships, this is Vengeance," she broadcast on the fleet command frequency. "Prepare to show these aliens what happens when you threaten humanity." The alien scouts continued their approach, unaware that they were flying into the most carefully prepared trap in human history. In minutes, the galaxy would witness something that had never happened before. The Zenthari hegemony was about to learn that technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. The first shots of humanity's war for survival were about to be fired, and the universe would never be the same. The moment that would change galactic history forever began with a simple command. Captain Nick Hayes looked at the tactical display showing 3 Zenthari destroyers approaching his position and spoke 2 words that would echo across the universe. "Fire all." The USS Retribution unleashed humanity's answer to galactic warfare. 6 railguns fired simultaneously, each one accelerating a dense tungsten projectile to nearly 10% of light speed. The chunks of metal, each weighing only a few kilograms, carried the kinetic energy of nuclear weapons as they streaked across space toward their targets, the Zenthari. Destroyers had no idea what was coming. Their energy shields, designed to deflect plasma bolts and particle beams, were completely useless against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectiles punched through the energy barriers as if they did not exist, then slammed into the crystalline hulls with devastating force. The lead Zenthari destroyer simply ceased to exist. The kinetic impact vaporized the entire forward section of the ship, sending a shockwave through the remaining hull that tore it apart from the inside. Within seconds, 800 meters of advanced alien technology had been reduced to an expanding cloud of superheated debris. The second destroyer lasted slightly longer. The kinetic projectile struck its port side, punching a hole clean through the ship from one side to the other. The alien vessel spun wildly as atmosphere and crew were sucked out through the massive breach. Secondary explosions rippled through its hull as damaged systems overloaded. The third destroyer's captain had enough time to realize what was happening before two more projectiles struck his ship. The first one shattered the bridge, killing the command crew instantly. The second one hit the engine section, causing the fusion reactor to lose containment. The resulting explosion lit up space like a small star. Commander Vextel stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. 3 of his destroyers had been eliminated in less than 30 seconds by what appeared to be a simple cargo vessel. The destruction was so complete and so sudden that his sensors could barely track what had happened. "Tactical analysis," he demanded, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. "What weapons did they use?" "Unknown, Commander," his tactical officer replied, his own voice filled with uncertainty. "The attack appears to have been conducted using solid projectiles rather than energy weapons. Our shields were completely ineffective." Vextel's forearms clenched into fists. Solid projectiles. Primitive kinetic weapons. It was impossible. No advanced civilization used such crude technology. Energy weapons were superior in every way, which was why every species in the galaxy had adopted them. But the debris field where his destroyers had been told a different story. Captain Maria Lopez aboard the USS Vengeance watched the destruction of the alien scouts with grim satisfaction. The first test of human weapons against Zenthari technology had been a complete success. Now it was time for the second phase. "Launch kinetic missile pods," she ordered. "Target the alien formation at the edge of the system." The Vengeance opened its hidden launch bays and released a spread of what appeared to be conventional missiles. But these were not explosive warheads designed to damage enemy ships. They were kinetic weapon platforms, each one containing dozens of dense metal projectiles and a guidance system programmed to deliver them with surgical precision. The missile pods accelerated toward the Zenthari fleet, their propulsion systems pushing them to tremendous velocities. As they approached their targets, each pod released its payload of kinetic projectiles, creating a lethal cloud of high-speed metal that no known defensive system could stop. The effect on the Zenthari fleet was immediate and devastating. The aliens watched in horror as their formation was systematically torn apart by weapons they had never encountered. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were crippled or destroyed by chunks of metal that cost humans almost nothing to produce. Captain Steve Rogers aboard the USS Liberty coordinated the attack from the cloaked defense platforms scattered throughout the asteroid belt. For 20 years, these installations had remained hidden, disguised as mining equipment and communication relays. Now they revealed their true purpose. "All platforms commence firing," Rogers commanded. "Target priority vessels according to the tactical plan." 347 hidden weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously. A coordinated barrage created a web of kinetic projectiles that crisscrossed the solar system, each one precisely targeted at a different Zenthari vessel. The aliens found themselves under attack from directions they had never considered, by weapons they could not defend against. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. Zenthari had built their empire on the principle of technological superiority. Their energy shields and plasma weapons had never failed them. But now they faced an enemy that had made their advantages meaningless by using completely different technology. Commander Vextel watched his mighty fleet being torn apart and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, not just of defeat, but of the unknown. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They used weapons that defied galactic military doctrine. They attacked from hidden positions that his sensors could not detect. All ships, evasive maneuvers he commanded, but even as he gave the order, he knew it was useless. The human projectiles moved too fast to avoid, and they seemed to come from everywhere at once. Captain Tony Mitchell aboard the USS Independence demonstrated the full extent of human tactical innovation by targeting the alien flagship itself. His ship appeared to be nothing more than a research vessel, but it carried weapons designed specifically to penetrate the heaviest armor and strongest shields. "Target the enemy command ship," Mitchell ordered. "Disable their weapons and propulsion systems. We want them alive to see what they're dealing with." The Independence fired a precisely calculated spread of kinetic projectiles at the Zenthari flagship. The shots were not intended to destroy the massive vessel, but to cripple it. Ah-da! One projectile struck the main weapon array, shattering the plasma cannon mountings. Another hit the propulsion section, disabling the fusion drives. A third punched through the shield generators, leaving the flagship defenseless. The precision of the attack was as terrifying as its effectiveness. The humans had not only created weapons that could penetrate Zenthari defenses, but they could use those weapons with surgical accuracy. They could destroy or disable enemy ships at will. The battle that the Zenthari had expected to be a simple demonstration of superiority had become a massacre. Their formation was in ruins. Their technological advantages had been rendered meaningless. Their confidence in their own invincibility had been shattered along with their ships. But the most terrifying realization was yet to come. The humans had not used their full strength. The 12 ships of their defense fleet were still largely intact, and the hidden weapons platforms continued to fire with devastating accuracy. The aliens were not just losing the battle. They were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had completely underestimated. Commander Vextel stared at his tactical display and finally understood the truth. The humans had spent decades preparing for this moment. They had studied galactic warfare, identified its weaknesses, and developed countermeasures that no other species had ever conceived. The first glimpse of human warships had made his entire fleet freeze in terror because it revealed something that had never existed in the galaxy before, an enemy that refused to fight by the rules. The Zenthari fleet hung motionless in space like a collection of broken toys. Commander Vextel stood on his damaged bridge, staring at tactical displays that showed the complete destruction of his forward squadrons. In less than an hour, the humans had eliminated over 200 ships from his fleet using weapons that should not have existed. 67 ships destroyed. 143 damaged beyond combat effectiveness, his tactical officer reported. The humans are maintaining their positions throughout the system. No signs of retreat or surrender. Vextel felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans were not acting like any species the hegemony had ever conquered. They simply continued their methodical destruction of his fleet as if it were routine maintenance. The psychological effect on his crews was becoming a serious problem. Zenthari warriors had never experienced defeat on this scale. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming technological superiority, and that advantage had been stripped away in minutes. Ships that had conquered star systems were being destroyed by primitive kinetic weapons. Captain Steve Rogers coordinated the next phase of the human attack from his position aboard the USS Liberty. The hidden defense platforms had completed their initial barrage, and now it was time to demonstrate the full extent of human tactical planning. "All platforms begin. Rotation pattern 7, Rogers commanded. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." The 347 weapons platforms, scattered throughout the asteroid belt, began a coordinated dance of destruction. They had been positioned over 20 years to create overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible approach to the inner system. Now they demonstrated why humanity had chosen quantity over individual ship size. Each platform was small and individually weak, but together they created a web of kinetic projectiles that no force could penetrate. The Zenthari watched in growing horror as their formation was systematically carved apart by attacks that seemed to come from empty space itself. "Commander, we cannot identify the source of the attacks," reported the sensor officer on Vextal S. flagship. "The humans appear to have weapon installations throughout this system, but our sensors cannot locate them." This was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the human defense. The Zenthari could see the results of the attacks, but could not find targets to shoot back at. Their enemies were invisible, untouchable, and completely deadly. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez watched the battle unfold from her command center buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains, and she felt a grim satisfaction at seeing decades of preparation paying off. "Platform effectiveness at 93%, her tactical officer reported. Sarah nodded. The defense network had been designed with one simple principle in mind: nothing that threatened Earth would escape alive. The platforms could engage targets at ranges that exceeded anything the aliens had encountered before, and their coordination was perfect thanks to quantum communication links. "Continue firing," she ordered. "Make sure they understand what happens. When you attack humanity..." Captain Amy Rodriguez aboard the Discovery continued her sensor analysis of the retreating Zenthari fleet, documenting the complete collapse of their military formation. What she saw confirmed everything that human intelligence had predicted about galactic warfare. "Captain, the alien fleet is showing signs of command breakdown," her communications officer reported. "We're intercepting transmissions indicating panic among their ship captains." Amy smiled grimly. The Zenthari had built their empire on intimidation. An overwhelming force. When those tactics failed, they had no backup plan. Their entire military culture was based on the assumption that superior technology guaranteed victory, and humans had just proven that assumption wrong. "Continue monitoring," Amy ordered. "Document everything. This data will be crucial for future encounters with galactic civilizations." The truth was that humanity had studied every aspect of galactic warfare for 50 years. They had analyzed the strategies, weapons, and tactics used by every major civilization. Most importantly, they had identified the single greatest weakness in galactic military thinking: the complete dependence on energy-based weapons and defenses. Captain Ben Taylor aboard the USS Defiance moved his ship into position for the final demonstration of human capabilities. The Defiance had remained hidden among the asteroid miners throughout the battle, appearing to be nothing more than a cargo hauler. Now it was time to reveal what humanity could do when they stopped pretending to be harmless. "All weapons systems online," his weapons officer reported. "Target lock acquired on the alien flagship." Taylor studied the tactical display, showing Commander Vextal's massive command ship limping away from the battle zone. The vessel was damaged, but not destroyed, which was exactly what the humans wanted. They needed witnesses to carry word of this encounter back to the hegemony. "Fire a single shot," Taylor ordered. "Target their remaining weapon systems." The Defiance fired one kinetic projectile at the Zenthari flagship. The tungsten rod, accelerated to tremendous velocity, punched through the alien ship's remaining defenses and destroyed its last functioning plasma cannon. The precision of the shot was a message in itself. Humans could destroy the flagship completely whenever they chose. Commander Vextal felt his ship shudder under the impact and realized that his situation was hopeless. The humans had demonstrated complete tactical superiority over his fleet. They could destroy his ships at will, disable them with surgical precision, or simply ignore them as the mood took them. But the most terrifying realization was the sheer scope of human preparation. This was not a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This was a carefully planned defense executed by beings who had spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Every move the humans made showed forethought, preparation, and technological innovation that went far beyond what galactic civilization had achieved. "Communications, open a channel to the human fleet," Vextal ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, are you requesting terms of surrender?" His communications officer Ast Vextel looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. 847 ships had entered this system. Less than 400 remained operational, and those were completely at the mercy of human weapons they could not defend against. "Yes," he said finally. "Request terms of surrender." Psychological impact of that decision rippled through the remaining Zenthari fleet like a shockwave. For the first time in their history, a hegemony fleet was surrendering to a supposedly inferior species. The implications would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever, Admiral. Lisa Kane received the surrender request at Fleet Command headquarters and felt a moment of satisfaction. Protocol 7 had worked exactly as planned. Humanity had faced its first test against galactic civilization and emerged victorious through superior tactics, innovative technology, and careful preparation. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. Word of this battle would spread throughout the galaxy, and humanity would face new challenges from species that would not underestimate them as the Zenthari had done. The first glimpse of human warships had indeed made an alien fleet freeze in terror, but it had also announced to the galaxy that a new power had emerged among the stars. The silence that followed Commander Vextel's surrender request stretched across space like a held breath. Admiral Lisa Kane stood in the Fleet Command Center, studying the tactical displays that showed the scattered remains of what had once been the most powerful invasion fleet in galactic history. Less than 400 Zenthari ships remained operational out of the original 847, and all of them were completely at humanity's mercy. "Open a channel to the alien flagship," Kane ordered. Her voice was calm, professional, carrying none of the triumph that her staff might have expected. This was not a moment for celebration. This was the beginning of humanity's entry into galactic politics. Every word would matter. The communications screen flickered to life, showing Commander Vextel on his damaged bridge. The proud alien warrior who had arrived expecting easy conquest now looked broken and defeated. His forearms hung limp at his sides, and his crystalline features showed the strain of watching his fleet destroyed by weapons he still did not understand. "I am Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet," she began. "You requested terms of surrender." Vextel straightened slightly, trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. "Yes, your weapons have proven superior to our defenses. We acknowledge your victory and request terms for the withdrawal of our remaining forces." Kane studied the alien commander for a long moment. Intelligence reports had described the Zenthari as proud warriors who had never known defeat. The psychological impact of this battle would spread far beyond this single fleet. Every species in the galaxy would learn that the supposedly invincible hegemony had been humbled by a young civilization using primitive kinetic weapons. "Your terms are simple," Kane replied. "Your fleet will withdraw from human space immediately. You will make no attempt to return. You will carry a message to your superiors explaining exactly what happened here today and our damaged ships." Vextel asked. "Will be allowed to depart under escort. We are not interested in prisoners or salvage. We want you to leave and never come back." The alien commander's expression showed confusion. Every species the Zenthari had defeated had either been enslaved or destroyed completely. The concept of a victor allowing their enemies to retreat with dignity was foreign to galactic military thinking. Captain Tony Mitchell aboard the USS Independence monitored the surrender negotiations while maintaining target lock on the alien flagship. His ship's weapons were more than capable of finishing off the Zenthari command vessel. But the orders from Fleet Command were clear. Let them go home with their tails between their legs. "Captain, why are we letting them leave?" his weapons officer asked. "We could finish them right here." Mitchell smiled grimly. "'Cause dead enemies can't spread the word about what happened to them. But survivors can tell stories that keep other fleets away from Earth." The wisdom of this approach was already becoming apparent. Captain Amy Rodriguez aboard the Discovery was intercepting communications between the surviving Zenthari ships. And the content was exactly what human strategists had hoped for. "Admiral, we're picking up internal Zenthari communications," Amy reported over the Fleet Command frequency. "Their ship captains are describing human weapons as impossible to defend against. They're calling our tactics completely unlike anything in their military databases." This was the real victory. The Zenthari would return to their empire carrying Stories of weapons that could penetrate any defense and tactics that no galactic civilization had ever seen. The psychological impact would be worth more than destroying their entire fleet. Commander Vextal began the humiliating process of ordering his surviving ships to withdraw from human space. Each vessel that limped away from the battle carried damaged crews who had witnessed the impossible. A technologically inferior species, defeating the might of the hegemony through pure tactical superiority. All ships begin withdrawal to the edge of the system, Vextal commanded. His voice carried across the fleet communication network, reaching captains who had never heard their commander admit defeat before. Maintain formation. Do not engage human vessels under any circumstances. The retreat was as carefully monitored as the battle had been. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez tracked every alien ship from her command center, ensuring that none of them attempted to deploy surveillance devices or weapons platforms as they withdrew. All enemy vessels are maintaining course for the system edge, her tactical officer reported. No signs of deception or hidden deployments. Sarah nodded. The humans had demonstrated their ability to track and destroy any threat in their space. The aliens would not risk further losses by attempting tricks during their withdrawal. Captain Steve Rogers coordinated the escort operation from the USS Liberty, leading a small formation of human ships that shadowed the retreating Zenthari fleet. The message was clear. Humanity was strong enough to destroy the invaders, but civilized enough to let them leave in peace. Escort formation. Maintain safe distance, Rogers commanded. Let them go home, but make sure they actually leave. Psychological effect on the alien crews was exactly what human planners had intended. The Zenthari found themselves being escorted to safety by the same ships that had destroyed most of their fleet. It was a demonstration of restraint that no galactic civilization had ever shown. It would be remembered as the alien fleet reached the edge of the solar system. Commander Vextal opened one final communication with Admiral Kane. The alien commander appeared on screen, looking older and wiser than he had hours earlier. Admiral Kane, I must ask, how did you know we were coming? How did you prepare such defenses against weapons you had never encountered? Kane smiled slightly. We listened, Commander. For 50 years, we monitored galactic communications and studied how civilizations like yours operate. We learned your tactics, your weapons, your weaknesses. When you finally found us, we were ready. Vextal's expression showed something approaching respect. Your species, you are not what we expected. The hegemony has conquered 23 worlds using the same methods. None of them were prepared. None of them were human, Kane replied simply. The alien commander nodded slowly. I will carry your message to the hegemony high command. They will want to know about the species that fights with impossible weapons and tactics that exist nowhere in our databases. Make sure they understand, Kane said. Earth is protected. Any future attempts at conquest will end the same way this one did. The communication ended, and the Zenthari fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would change the galaxy forever. The human ships watched them disappear, then began the process of standing down from combat. Alert. Captain Jake Morrison received word aboard the New Horizon that the crisis had passed. The mining colonies he had been supplying were safe, and humanity had survived its first encounter with galactic civilization. As he looked out at the stars, he realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they had announced their presence with a victory that would be remembered for generations. The first glimpse of human warships had indeed made an alien fleet freeze in terror. But more importantly, it had established humanity as a force to be respected among the stars. The galaxy would never underestimate the species from the small blue planet again.